Hello, Rank Squad, and welcome to Ranks FC. It's your Champions League preview show. My name is Jack Collins. I'll be your host today. I'm joined by the one and only Mr. Sam Ty. How you doing, mate?
Very well, thank you, mate. Very well. Still shocked, stunned, and reeling from last night's results, which went absolutely not according to plan, if you ask me. No way near where I thought they'd be. Just highlights the unpredictability of this stage of the season, of these contests. You know, when it really matters, when the pressure's turned up, all sorts of stuff can happen. So it just makes me even more excited for tonight. Just do not know what to expect anymore, do we?
Yeah, I mean, I did tell you that Man City were going to beat Bayern Munich, but you had no interest in listening to me. So I'm going to take that. I also said that Benfica were going to do a job on Inter, so let's take that with every pinch of salt that it deserves. 2 games tonight as well. Frank Lampard's Chelsea travel to the cathedral of European Cup football, the Santiago Bernabeu, and Milan host Napoli and the San Siro. 2 amazing stadiums tonight. 2 old school stadiums of law in this competition, of all competitions, but 2 good games as well, and 2 games I think where at least there are unpredictabilities for us to dig into.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, with Real Madrid and Chelsea, it's a case of, well, suddenly Frank Lampard's in charge. How do they get on? Has the change that they've made in the dugout over the last couple of weeks, you know, it feels like it's sort of geared towards this point. And so will the decision they made be proven remotely correct? Real Madrid's a pretty tough task. It's a pretty high mountain to climb. So the odds of that happening, at the risk of sounding wrong again, do feel quite limited, but we'll see. You never know. And in Milan, Napoli, I mean, I'm sure that we all had Napoli as favourites, but Victor Osimhen doesn't look like he's going to be available, and Milan just beat Napoli 4-0. So where do we stand with that one? I don't know. I just can't wait to dig in and see.
Yeah, lots to like. Let's start at the Bernabeu. Let's give Real Madrid, as champions of Europe, their due. They get the honours on the tee, if you will. We will say now that if you fancy coming and joining us and having a chat in the comments, asking some questions, we will bring them up towards the end of each of the games. So fire them in there, and we'll see what we get up to. Let's pull up some fun things to have a look at, though, Sam, shall we? And let's start in this Real Madrid Chelsea game with the fact that Chelsea can't score goals.
Well, you said fun, but I don't think Chelsea fans think this is particularly fun. So obviously, name of the game here is being clinical. Chelsea are far from it, and this needs to improve and change this evening. You know, starting now. I mean, we've been saying that for months, obviously, but this is where it kicks in. You will not be able to survive an encounter with Real Madrid over 2 legs if you can't take your chances, and this has obviously been Chelsea's massive problem over the course of 2023. This is their shot map from the last 3 games. So obviously you've got 1 from each manager, 1 from Potter, 1 from Bruno, 1 from Lampard. This is Aston Villa, Liverpool, and Wolves as opponents. They've scored 0 goals during that stretch. You know, lost a couple and drawn 0-0. Most of these shots are off target. All of the nice dark-coloured ones, which are from good locations, good positions, have all missed. You know, this isn't new. Like, I'm not sitting here telling you that Chelsea are poor in front of goal and everyone's going, my God, what fantastic analysis. But this is the starting point to the conversation. And it's about whether or not Frank Lampard can find an answer to this. Because Real Madrid on these nights can be very defensively solid. I think they defend their box very, very well. I think they're very difficult to get the better of in the air and from set pieces. They've got some very good players at attacking and defending those scenarios. So finding spaces for shots is going to be difficult, I think, for Chelsea. And so if space is at a premium and opportunities are at a premium, you really want someone to be quite clinical with the chances they do get. Chelsea lack that. And if they can't fix that tonight, they cannot win this game.
Yeah, I mean, that's slightly Michael Owen-esque. It's if you don't score goals, you can't win matches. But
they rarely win.
They rarely win, indeed. But I think there's an element here of, you know, we've seen Chelsea be profligate before. Not just this season, but in other seasons as well. And notably in Thomas Tuchel's seasons in charge, they managed to get by that to win the Champions League. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, although Lucas has put in the comments saying that when you look at this, Lampard in the driving seat, is this a Di Matteo scenario? unfolding, I feel like it was a very different team at a very different place than what Chelsea are at right now. But I think the key element here is, and maybe the answer to this question lies within the idea of, can Chelsea step up on a big occasion? Because actually, last season there were elements, I think, generally where the team weren't firing at all cylinders, but actually some of their best performances came against Real Madrid in the Champions League, even when the side was struggling a little bit domestically.
Yeah, the difference between the two Chelsea teams, of course, the Di Matteo scenario and this one around is that Di Matteo side was full of big game players, wasn't it? It had an incredible spine, and it was full of big game players. It had Lampard himself in the team, as your case in point, and I think it would be very fair to doubt whether or not Chelsea have any of their forwards can be counted on those big moments and for those big chances. I think maybe historically Raheem Sterling has got something to say here, but the rest of them I'm really unsure. So the comparison is nice, and it obviously gives Chelsea fans a lot of hope. And you never know what might happen, but this Chelsea team they lack the spine and the structure that their previous iteration had, and of course they lack a deadly forward. So Chelsea, that's where it starts, I'm afraid. And moving into Chelsea's attack, I think where they do need to have a look and try to find some joy here is down the flanks. It can be very, very difficult, nigh on impossible, to win the midfield battle against Real Madrid. You will never win it for 90 minutes. You may not even win it for a half, because you're going to come up against Toni Kroos, Luka Modric, and then one of Tchouaméni or Camavinga. So down the flanks is where I find it very interesting, because as I said, the box defending is very strong. So that means you're going to have to get the better of these two fellas. Now, we don't know exactly what's going to happen at left back. Fellaini is injured, but it could be Alaba, could be Nacho, could be Camavinga. Whichever one of those three it is, they are going to be very difficult to get past. Camavinga in particular is very interesting, I think, because he's such a good tackler and such a good duel specialist. And Chelsea are going to have to try and find some joy down the flanks here. Chilwell, James, whoever it is. And they're going to come up against this. The tackle monster Camavinga on the left, and Federico Valverde very likely to play it on the right flank, who starts in a 4-3-3, but it kind of shifts into a 4-4-2. He does a lot of defensive work to help Dani Carvajal down the right-hand side. So, Chelsea, can you find a way past this kind of like doubling up on both sides? Camavinga's he feels like two players in one at times, the way he gets about, and Valverde will break his own neck to make sure that Carvajal is not exposed. Can you find a way past either the midfield or this doubling effort? And if you can you then get into positions to shoot and score? That's the task they're facing.
Well, it leaves questions about what you do with your best players in this scenario, right? Because I think there's no real questions about where Ben Chilwell is going to play. The only question you'd ask is what the shape is going to look like. Is it going to be three at the back? Is it going to be four at the back? We've seen Reece James shepherded into a right centre-back role. Obviously, that was the last game in charge of Graham Potter. We haven't seen it since, but he's played there. He's played at right back. He's played at right wing back. I mean, we've seen him very, very briefly at centre midfield as well, but I don't think he's going to start there today. The question is, where does Reece James play in this game? And I think it makes a huge difference to this argument, right?
Right. So Reece James, I think this is a very good debate, because here's the two heat maps, one from Aston Villa and then one from Wolves. So against Villa, he's right centre back in a 3. Against Wolves, he's clearly on the flank. That heat map on the right-hand side, ordinarily, I'd be saying that's what we want to see from Reece James, right? You want to see him getting into those positions. You want to see him getting into crossing positions. Maybe if Chelsea can build down the left and switch to the right, he can be coming onto the ball at speed. He might have shooting opportunities. Basically, all the stuff that Ruben Loftus-Cheek was getting on the end of against Aston Villa and messing up, you want Reece James on the end of usually. But do we need to pay consideration here to the fact that Reece James, when he's still on the halfway line, can be something of a lockdown defensive presence? And is that exactly what Chelsea need here, when you consider that Real Madrid utilise Vinicius Jr. and Karim Benzema as a dovetailing, linking, left-sided duo, and they are two of the very, very finest in the game? Do Chelsea actually need Reece James on the halfway line more than they need him on the flank? And I don't actually know the answer, Jack. I think we can posit theories, and I think you can make a good argument either way. But it really depends on how bold Frank Lampard wants to be and which of Reece James's skill sets does he think needs to shine on the night.
Well, it leads us on quite nicely to how you think Chelsea are going to set out, right? Because actually, this takes us to a point of, is this a three at the back game for Chelsea? We've only seen Frank Lampard take charge of one game. It was that 1-0 loss to Wolves. So I don't think we can take it as gospel that he's going to go for a four at the back. There's always been kind of hints, I think, that Lampard likes the idea of a three at the back, but he's never really been bold enough to push it off full steam. And I do wonder if this is an opportunity he goes to go, you know what, actually, that might just suit me this evening. And I'm intrigued. At the very least, I'm intrigued.
So the other question here is, obviously, Thiago Silva's been missing for a while now. He's returned to training this week. Do you risk it? Do you pop him in? Do you put him in the middle of the three?
Was this the end of the season? If Chelsea are out of this Champions League, what's left to play for? So, I mean, yes, obviously you have to be careful of people's health. So I'm not saying chuck him in if he's not fit. But if he is fit and he's fit enough to be in training and you're worried about keeping him for, I don't know, the weekend's game or whatever comes next in the Premier League, I think that's insane. Whereas I think that if he's not fit, he's not fit, fine. But I think there's an element of, if he is fit, there's absolutely no point holding him back because there's nothing to hold him back for. What are they holding him back for? Brighton at home?
No, the second leg, I would say. But I mean, this game might be out of sight by the second leg if he's not. So yeah, it's very interesting, and I think it shapes the way this back line is put together. Fofana is a good young player, but he's still like, this is a huge stage. This would be the biggest stage he's ever played on, and I don't know if I'd be comfortable with Wesley Fofana trying to track, Vinicius Junior and Karim Benzema while Reece James is trying to fly forward and provide an attacking threat. Like, that would really worry me, despite the fact that Kante's there, despite the fact that Raheem Sterling works hard. I want Sterling running over the top. I want to stretch Real Madrid. I want to make sure that I've got a player on the shoulder, and I think that's got to be Raheem Sterling. So if Silva is 60% fit, I'd stick him in there. I really would. And I would give good consideration to putting James next to him and trying to hold this Real Madrid team at bay, because this is the away game. Like, this is really tough. But if they can come away from this intact, even if Silva only plays 60 minutes, like, I'm pretty interested in that. I have to say, the impact of Kante is going to be interesting. I would also assume that Kovacic starts. I mean, he definitely knows how to play against this team. He did come from them. And in this really tight technical midfield, isn't he the guy that can just like wiggle away and go on a little marauding run 30 yards? Suddenly something's opened up. He sounds ideal for this. So yeah, Lampard's got a huge decision to make here. It's partially informed by Silva's fitness, but partially informed as to how he wants this game to go and how bold he wants to be. I think we'll see exactly what he's thinking in how he deploys Reece James and if he deploys Thiago Silva.
If he does go five at the back and James goes right centre back, who plays outside of him? Because there's a big question mark there. Because, as you say, is that Raheem Sterling's role, or do you want him in a front two, if that's going to be the case? And I don't know who comes out then, because you'd imagine if that was going to be the front two, Havertz must remain as a kind of ghosting target. But they haven't dropped Joao Felix because he's been, goal scoring aside, excellent since he's come into this Chelsea team.
Yeah, I know. Decisions, isn't it? I actually don't envy him here. It's going to be a really tough balance to strike, and not only that, but like, you've got to go up against Real Madrid. Like, it's really tough. This is their competition, man. And Vinicius Junior is looking real good. Benzema's looking real good. Oh, yeah, this is going to be difficult.
Yeah, tricky one. Just two questions, I suppose. Who do you actually think starts the left back for Real Madrid? Do you think Rudiger starts? And is it Tchouaméni in the middle? Because it's what I would assume at this point. I know that Camavinga is here in this diagram, but I'd be very surprised if it's not Tchouaméni in the middle of this midfield.
I'd also be surprised if it's not Tchouaméni, and I'd be surprised if we don't see Alaba, unless there's a fitness problem that I'm unaware of. So my prediction will be Alaba in place of Rudiger, Camavinga in place of Nacho, and Tchouaméni into the middle. But look, Nacho's been really good as like a 1v1 defender. He's been brought in for specific assignments. You make it simple for him. You give him a relatively simple brief. He's pretty good at stopping good, talented players from playing. He did it against Liverpool, and he could do it here. So I can understand the value in having him in on a night like this. He's very reliable.
Okay. All right. Let's go back just for a minute to our top screen. And we got a comment saying from Cat Guy saying pressure's on not to get predictions wrong on back-to-back preview shows. Lol. I agree, Cat Guy. How do you see this playing out? Can you see any hope here for Chelsea at the Bernabeu?
Well, I said last night that I'd be stunned and shocked if Inter got anything out of Benfica and they won 2-0. So, yes, I can see something potentially happen. I mean, my prediction will be that Real Madrid win. They're by far the stronger team, more cohesive unit. Haven't recently changed their manager. Haven't got too many fitness concerns. This is their competition. This is their tends to be their night. So I'll go for Real Madrid, but I'm going to be nowhere near as certain as I have been. I've paid the price already.
Well, I think there's an element of you look at this Real Madrid team, and if we're comparing them to Benfica, which they are in this situation, they're not missing 2 out of 4 / maybe 3 out of 4 of their preferred back line. And that's not going to be exploited by Chelsea. If this happens, it's because Chelsea are going to have to turn up and beat a full strength Real Madrid. And that's a pretty daunting task. It's not quite the same thing that was ahead of Inter yesterday.
Very true. Very true. Well said. Well covered.
I always cover my bases like a good number 6. Right, so let's come on to AC Milan versus Napoli. And, well, I think everyone thought that this was going to be plain sailing at one point when the draw was made. Napoli were coasting clear at the top of Serie A. And what you actually look at and you think is this last game which happened, which was the 4-0 that we all watched in Naples at the Maradona. AC Milan came to town and shut down the Napoli party. And Aiden's in a comment straight away saying, what did Milan do defensively last time to shut out Napoli? Now, I wasn't going to put this in straight away, but I'm going to do it because I think that it answers that question more effectively than anything else. The answer is, Aiden, that they didn't. This is the XG timeline from that game. And what we saw kind of in the course of that game is Milan taking their chances and Napoli not taking theirs. There's not much between these two sides across the course of this XG timeline. And obviously, there are elements to this that you can't take at face value. Data is not always perfect, and anyone that watched the game will tell you that Milan were the better side in that game, 100%. But they weren't the dominant side, I don't think. They were the more clinical side. They were the side that were most effective, and they worked the best with what they had. But actually, if Napoli had scored 1-2, it wouldn't have been too far off. I think this game turning on its head, and the way that the third and fourth goals ran about in this game and kind of came about, especially the Salamaca's goal where he drifts through the entire defense, I think you can't almost plan for within any situation. And if you look at the momentum chart, which I'm going to pull up quickly, Napoli have most of it. And I think that there are elements here to taking your chances, to making full effect of the moments you have. I just think that generally Milan are a side who are able to play on the counter. That switch to a 4 at the back, I thought really, really helped in terms of allowing them to get back into that counter-attacking vision. But I genuinely think the biggest thing about it was Osimhen missing. And obviously Osimhen's missing tonight. But if you look at the average position maps, look how high Kvara is, look how high Politano is, trying to get in behind the Milan fullbacks, which is fine. Because obviously when you have Theo Hernandez there, that's one thing. But I think that you're looking at this and thinking about it, and look where Giovanni Simeone is in the middle of this, on top of his old midfield. And generally, that's not the worst thing in the world. But I think for this Napoli side, who are so used to an Osimhen stretching defenses, being able to get over the top, who are able to cover 2 defenders at once and stop them playing out, there's so much of it that I look at and go, Simeone is a completely different option. You know that Sam and I differ on how we view Gio Simeone. I think he's an excellent weapon. But
doesn't sound like you're saying that, Jack. Sounds like
in
you're calling him a fraud.
In a side that are based on the runs of Victor Osimhen, he's a very different weapon, which is why he's useful towards the end of games. When he comes on, teams are tired and he's able to use that aerial power. He's able to use that box prowess, fine. But he's never going to be that striker that stretches. And Napoli are built to play like it. Look how high the right back and left back are. Look how high the wingers are. This is a team built to stretch, especially on the counter, especially in transition. And if he can't provide that, then they struggle. I think you look at Milan on a kind of completely opposite vibe, where Giroud sits in the middle and allows players to get beyond him. That's a completely different type of weapon to have within your arsenal, and one that Milan are used to playing with. I think Napoli really struggled in terms of how they went about the game here with Simeone there, because he wasn't able to bring everyone else into play in the same way that Osimhen is, or the same way that Giroud it has a team built around him to do.
If you flip back to the match momentum chart, we'll just explain that a little bit. It's got a key on the side, and it basically says that this is measuring final third passes differential. So what this match momentum chart is telling you that is that Napoli are completing many more final third passes than Milan throughout this game, which essentially paints a picture of them dominating territory, dominating possession and territory. So you can imagine from this chart, Napoli are camped in Milan's half, camped in their third, pinging the ball around as they do. The midfield's really enjoying themselves, but they're not getting a breakthrough. They're not finding a way through. So yes, they've got all the territory in the possession, and yes, they're completing passes, so they have momentum, but there's no threat, or they're lacking threat. They can't find that final pass. They can't bring their striker into the game. Obviously, Milan, it's much easier for them to do that here because they're allowed to counter. They're allowed to pick their way through some spaces as they open up on the counter. But for Napoli, more often than not, they end up slinging the ball into the box and Osimhen crashes it home. Like it's an underrated quality of his, because of the context of Napoli, because they do play such lovely football and they can pick you apart, and Kvara can do all sorts. Sometimes they just sling it in the box and he heads it home. And it's very traditional to a point. They weren't really able to conjure any of this. Milan are defensively strong in this chart, and that's kind of what that means. And that's the picture we're painting. You go back to the average positions, and Simeone's not connecting. He's not in the right positions, and he's not getting touches in the right area, and that's why he's on top of his midfielders. What that dot means when he's so deep is that he hasn't had any touches in the area that you would expect, which is near Milan's penalty box or maybe the D. So they're going to have to figure this out. I don't know if it's going to be. Is it going to be Simeone tonight, or would it be Raspadori?
No, it's not. I think it's going to be Raspadori. Simeone limped off in the win against Lecce. We can come to this. It looks like it's going to be Raspadori. Raspadori is a player who can link play, who obviously played alongside Scamacca at Sassuolo, who was able to play in that kind of slightly more 10 role at times. But I think he's also a kind of player who will be able to get in behind and start to run behind. He has that pace. He has that ability to ghost in behind defenders. And I think that will help Napoli tonight. I think his presence in here instead of Simeone, and obviously, as you're saying, Osimhen's this kind of rare unicorn in that he can do both. He can occupy defenders, he can get in behind, and he can win headers in the box. Napoli have Raspadori and they have Simeone. They have Simeone to win headers in the box and try and crash the ball home. And they have Raspadori to try and occupy defenders, to make those smart movements, to get into those different areas. They're two sides of the Osimhen coin. Osimhen is special because he can do both. But I think that in a game like this, especially at San Siro, where Milan's fans would expect them to come out and be far more dominant on the ball than they were in Naples, I think that there is going to be spaces for Raspadori and Kvara to kind of take them, to make the most out of. And I think that Chucky Lozano coming in for Politano, again, suggests that Napoli expect to be more reactive tonight. Politano is one of those players who is able to get the ball down and able to play in those final thirds and make those cute passes, make those links. I think that Lozano is far more likely to be able to crash through a Milan side who are going to be a little bit more forward thinking this evening. There's a reason I think that both sides, no side has won this game at home for 9 meetings. And it comes back to this question from Owen. He says, which side is better, playing from a position where they don't have momentum? I think this is a game which suits the team in transition. And for that, it's often the side who are playing away from home because they don't have the crowd on top of them expecting them to dominate the ball in every phase of a situation. So those things are so interesting.
But Milan are better built to attack on transition than Napoli.
Yeah, but imagine if Napoli are camped in the Milan half again. The San Siro is going to get nervous. It's going to get edgy. It's not going to be comfortable.
I'm with you, but I think that's what's going to happen. I think Pioli will go, hey, you know the ball. That's fine. We'll block in. We'll use Giroud as a bounce board. We get Rafa Leao running into space. We get Teo running into space and underlapping. I genuinely think they'd be okay with this. I mean, I don't know. Correct. I don't know how San Siro feels about this, but I think the 11 players on the pitch and the coach in the dugout will probably do this. I think they'll probably be quite happy to let Napoli have the ball and cut through them. I mean, after all, they just did it and won 4-0. So if it's a tried and trusted formula, do it again.
Yeah, no, I get you. I get you. I think this is interesting from Joseph. He says key to the game is Milan's midfield three. Last game was critical to shutting down Napoli, and absolutely spot on. And it actually, go touches back on Aidan's question about how did they stop Napoli being a threat, not necessarily in terms of where they were on the pitch, but in terms of how it worked. I think there's an element here of Benacer playing as a 10 in this graph, as you can see, is not completely wrong. He actually came in and he sat on Lobotka and he basically stopped Lobotka controlling games in the way that he has done so much this season. His renaissance as a player has been one of the keys to Napoli's success, and he's been an absolute delight to watch in so many ways. But what Pioli did really, really well was worked out exactly how to shut that down and pushing Benacer a little bit higher up the pitch, allowing him to just shut down that Lobotka tempo control, allowed Milan to just be able to get back into their positions, get back into shape and reset defensively before Napoli could tear them apart. And those midfield threes are going to be a really, really important matchup again tonight. Sam, Lobotka, and and Zielinski against what we assume will be Krunic, Tonali, and Benacer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of a number of these players, to be honest with you. I absolutely love Benacer. He's probably going to be my favourite midfielder on the pitch, which I don't say lightly, given how good Lobotka is and how good Anguissa is, and got a lot of love for Zielinski too. But Benacer, man, I'd trust him with my life. He's a coach's dream in that sense. He's one of those players that we talk about that can combine the kind of press resistance and distribution alongside that defensive nous, makes him a perfect number 6. But then if you want to go and stick him into a situation like this, more of a cancelling role, which is really hard to pull off, by the way. Like, we talk about man marking like it's the easiest thing in the world. Like, oh, remember when Ander Herrera cancelled Eden Hazard? I mean, that took 3 years off his life, I mean, this stuff is hard to do. These players have to be really good in order to carry out that kind of role. So if that happens again and they can really start to play with Napoli there, I mean, it will hurt them to a point, but the good thing about Napoli is they're able to control and build in multiple different ways. Like, it's not a case that if you shut down Lobotka, it's over. They should be able to find another way. But usually the other way is to go a bit longer to Guevara. So if they sit deeper and they manage to mark Lobotka out of the game, they'll be already onto plan C. And that's where it starts to get interesting here, because I praise Napoli a lot for having many, many answers to the questions they're posed. But again, when it comes down to these evenings and it comes down to the pressure on these games, what happens? Who cracks? Who succeeds? I never for 1 second thought I'd watch Bayern Munich fall apart on the Champions League stage. But that happened last night. They were pummeled into submission. You just never know.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that's really interesting is Napoli, this is their shot map conceded over 2 legs against Eintracht. Now, bear in mind, Kolo Muani is obviously sent off in the first leg and therefore can't play in the second. So Eintracht are missing their main goal threat. But that's over 180 minutes of football, and Napoli have restricted them to almost nothing. You contrast that and conflict it with their shot map conceded against Milan in that 4-0. And you can see where things started to get a bit mucky for them. That cluster towards the right-hand side of the box you're looking at, it is all basically Rafael Leao getting into the spaces he wants to get in. And they have to shut that down tonight, especially if Milan are going to be able to do what you say and kind of resist the temptation of the crowd to try and get forward and try and suck Napoli in to play on the counter. These are the areas that Napoli have to shut down if they're going to stop what happened last time happening again.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, like, first note on the tactical plan when you play Milan is, look out for that bloke on the left. He's quite good at dribbling. It does, and then the guy behind him as well, the guy that comes and looks at him, he's quite good too. So yeah, absolutely. Rafa Leao's not been at his best over the course of this season, but every now and then we see a little glimpse, don't we? It just reminds you. And I keep thinking about that tweet that I saw on the evening of this 4-0, which was Rafa Leao's been looking at your tweets. He's been watching you praise Kvara over and over again, and he's got something to say about it. And hey, he stood up that night and he played superbly. If he does it again tonight,
and he took that personally.
He really did. And if he does it again tonight, and we cannot rule it out. In fact, I'm starting to talk myself into thinking that Milan might pull something off tonight. Then, well, yeah, I mean, it might reshape the conversation. It really might.
Well, let's just keep things in perspective. This is Reacher's shot map from his Champions League campaign this year. Obviously, you can see that again, that heavy left-hand side does feel like another one of those battles between these two that we'd hyped up before the last game. But in this context, I think it feels even more astute and even more in the spotlight. This is a player who can make things happen. In Osimhen's absence, he was kind of not given the opportunities to shine in that first Milan game. He needs to step up tonight.
He absolutely does. Yeah, he does. I mean, he links really well with Osimhen, which is lovely to watch. And when Osimhen's not there, obviously even more of the onus falls at Kvara's feet. You know, we got Raspadori and Simeone here. We're talking about, well, you'd say two good players. I'd say one, but two players that can step in and provide different elements and try to replace Osimhen at different points. But if Kvara's not on it, then yes, obviously they have a bit of a problem. Now, what works in his favour is that Milan's right side tends to crumble about 50% of the time. And Kalulu, I think, is out. So, you know, Kalulu would be the sort of number one option here, I'd say, who could maybe latch onto him and stop him. He's not going to be around to do that. Probably going to be Calabria. He has his days. He also has his other days.
He also has his off days, yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to see. But Kvara will get shots away. Like, it doesn't really matter how well you constrict him. Like, he may get more ambitious, and maybe some of the stuff he does is misguided as he starts to try and force the issue. But like, he will do his best to force his way into this game. He's going to be very, very, very difficult to keep at arm's length here, even without Osimhen. Although I do find myself coming back to something you said a couple of weeks ago in the wake of the 4-0, which was it takes an entire defensive line to marshal Victor Osimhen. And when he's not there, suddenly they're a bit freer to deal with the others. And was that really the main factor in suddenly Kvara being less effective?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, look, that trio of Kjaer, Calabria, and Krunic were very impressive. And Krunic's ability to get back there and make those defensive work really happen and to really get into it was crucial, I think, to Kvara being quietened down at the very least in that game. But I think it's going to be very difficult to do it twice in a row, is how I would probably put it. Right, we have a couple of questions, and they're actually not necessarily all about this game. It's from Jordan, apart from about last night. So considering Sam has Bayern as his favourites, have Man City now taken their place after their emphatic performance last night? The tie is not completely dead, but City obviously have a huge advantage.
Let's see what Real Madrid do tonight. But yes, before a ball is kicked this evening has to be the case. I mean, my issue with Bayern and the issue with that ranking, is, as I talked about, was, you know, Bayern had been the best team in the Champions League up until that point. Now they've changed managers. Where does that leave them? My logic was it wouldn't make them any worse. So I just kept them top. But we weren't really quite sure what to make of Bayern. And after watching last night, you cannot have that team. Of course you can't. So City for now, but it is pending a big old asterisk on Real Madrid.
Here's one for you. Is Julian Nagelsmann the only manager ever to win every Champions League game he's had in a campaign and not win the Champions League?
I mean, I would not be surprised if that's the case, you know, with a sample size of, say, 5 or more. I mean, surely some managers have won a couple games and then been fired. But eight Champions League victories. I mean, he must be
8-0 and change managers, and they do that. I'd imagine there were some smiles or some smirks at the very least in Nagelsmann's household last night. I like this from Chase. Chase said Vinny will run circles around Reece. Madrid 2-0 tonight. We haven't seen many people run circles around Reece James. And also, I believe that Vinicius Jr. was one of them who said he was one of the hardest defenders he's ever had to play against. So we're very excited to see that battle back on again tonight.
I mean, the 2-0 scoreline wouldn't surprise me. But anyone running circles around Reece would. That doesn't tend to happen. But Vinny's special, so we'll see.
Indeed. And with that, I think it's probably time for us to call it a day. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Champions League preview show on Ranks. Thank you so much for all of your questions and comments as well. Please do make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you're not already. Later on tonight, we will have a Champions League review show with us two and Mr. Dean Jones. That'll be out probably just after midnight. It is usually the time I manage to get it live on YouTube, but as soon as I can physically get it onto the platform, I'll have it here for you. Thank you so much to Mr. Sam Tsai.
Cheers, mate. Enjoy the games again this evening. looking forward to joining you later to chew through it all. I mean, I've got some mea culpas to get on the record, haven't I? And so I really hope that tonight it starts to go a little bit more like I thought. However, as I said to you, I have kind of talked myself into thinking Milan are going to do something tonight, I've got to say.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you very shortly. Take it easy, gang. Peace.